Hello, hello. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes and just see if we get anyone joining. 11 o'clock and later. Can you see me? Are we? Are we? Okay, I see. Are we? Hey Jacob, how are you? Hi Tom. Oh, good. Okay. It's I'm a little rusty, if you will. So just making sure that, and you can hear me too, right? I'll just assume that the two of you will let me know if there are any issues. Oh, good, Jacob. I am glad to hear that. What is everybody up to the rest of the day after this? I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes. Seltzer. Don't forget to hydrate. Oh, good for you, Jacob. Did you do that? Was it like a structured thing? Good, Tom. We like a relaxing Sunday. I've been okay. I'm tired, but I don't have any complaints. Um, very fortunate given a lot of what's going on. Hey, that's great, Jacob. Whatever works. Whatever works. Hopefully this isn't loud. I have the quietest fidget possible. I think I'm going to relax today too. I think that is my plan. Okay, I'm just gonna give it another minute while I try to get my screen share going. That way we can get the presentation going. Okay. It's kind of weird to be on camera again. Okay. I can see. We love you too, Jacob. All right, I'm gonna get into this and then if there are questions at the end and we can always chat a little bit more, but I am going to sort of get right into it. So today's workshop is hypermobility, body mechanics, chronic pain. Woohoo! Hypermobility is one of those things that a lot of us suffer from, but I think that there's a lot of confusion between what it is and what we can do to help manage pain. So quickly, who am I? This is me. I'm a certified health coach, personal trainer, and guess what? Yoga instructor, brand new, woohoo. Found out I'm autistic, ADHD, and hypermobile when I was 40 years old, and I'm focused on neurodiversity affirming health and well-being. Okay. Oh yeah, subscribe. I'm supposed to say that. Don't forget to subscribe. Legal stuff, as a reminder, this is not medical advice, it's not mental health advice, it's not personalized health advice. This is general information being disseminated, not personal recommendations. Make sure you are consulting the appropriate medical professionals before changing anything. But with that, let's just jump into it. Okay, what is hypermobility? First of all, we have to understand what is mobility. Mobility is just basically the joints range of motion. So each joint on the body has what is a safe versus unsafe range of motion. And you can see I pulled these couple of images from my textbook just to give you an idea. You can see a little bit about knee, ankle, and shoulder mobility. Personal trainers are, our wheelhouse is muscles and movement. And so when we learn about mobility and range of motion, what we're mostly taught is how to increase people's range of motion, because most people have decreased range of motion for various reasons. Being hypermobile, it is often the opposite, where we're going to have a greater range of motion, and that can be unsafe because that's when things start popping out of place and doing things that they shouldn't. This is often referred to as joint laxity. And so when the joints are not held in place as tightly, they're a little bit wishy-washy, which is mostly what they call a collagen defect. Now, because muscles and movement are my wheelhouse with personal training, talking about joints themselves, I can talk about how to support joints, but actually, like the way that joints and ligaments are not, that's not my wheelhouse. That is a physical therapist or a doctor. So let's get into kind of the relationship between these, because this is where it gets confusing. You'll see a lot of hypermobile people talk about, and I do this too, talk about how to work out to strengthen for hypermobility. So let's talk about the relationship between ligaments and tendons and muscles and all of that. When we talk about joint laxity and a joint's inability to hold itself in place, we're referring to a combination of ligaments and tendons. Our ligaments are what connect bone to bone. Tendons connect bone to muscle. And so when we talk about a collagen defect causing laxity, it is laxity in these tendons and ligaments because they are both made up of primarily a collagen and elastic-based fiber connective tissue. That's what the connective tissue is made of. We have different types of connective tissues as well. So that's what those are made up of. Now, ligaments have more elastic fibers than tendons do. And so they are not meant to have as much give. They're meant to have even less give than tendons to really hold things in place. And then muscles are made up of a completely different type of tissue. Those are designed to have a lot more give. There are, a lot more, there's blood moving freely through it and all sorts of things. So when people talk about hypermobility, what we're talking about are these ligaments and tendons not being as tight as they should be because of a defect with the ability to produce collagen. So again, as a personal trainer, what causes that? That's not for me to talk about. That's medical. What I can do is say, okay, if this is the situation, what can we do to help, or what can we do to manage? So let's talk about then hypermobility versus hypermobile spectrum disorder, because a lot of people, it can be confusing. They're not necessarily the exact same thing. Hypermobility just refers to the joints in the physical body. Most people will determine if they're hypermobile using the Beighton scoring system. There is also, if you are hypermobile, you are probably, but not necessarily, on the hypermobile spectrum. And that can include all sorts of things like MCAS, pain, fatigue, GI issues, MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. So oftentimes what happens is I will sort of see people talk about hypermobility, but what they're really talking about are things that fall more within the spectrum as opposed to the joint itself. And you can just have hypermobile joints and not necessarily have anything else on the spectrum. So just to sort of point that out and clarify. Why? Again, this is medical. It goes back to kind of where all of these things originate from. Yeah. Now, this is the one that is, does anyone have any questions first? Just making sure. Okay. This is the one where a lot of people get, it gets confusing, is if your joints are too open and too loosey-goosey, how can you be hypermobile but not flexible? And there's really two main reasons for this. One of them is overcompensation. And so when we're hypermobile, what often happens is we're going to overcompensate in some ways because of undercompensation in other ways. So for example, when you bend over, like this lovely little skeleton figure is doing, into a forward fold, if your knees are hypermobile and they bend back, what's going to happen is you're going to reduce the amount, you're going to reduce the height to which you need to get down to the floor. And so you're also going to bend over more in your back, and that's going to stretch those muscles. And so what happens is it looks like you're flexible because you're able to touch the floor. However, because the knees are hypermobile and things aren't necessarily properly aligned, the muscles themselves are not flexible. And so we can have flexibility around our joints, but also flexibility within the muscle itself, its ability to basically sort of stretch and go back to where it came from. And so when we create these different over and under compensations in our body, it's not necessarily that we're flexible in the correct places. It's that our body has learned to overcompensate to make up for various things. And so you may have hypermobile knees, which push the back out, brings the floor closer to you, and then you have less flexibility in your hamstrings because you don't actually have to, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see me, you don't have to straighten them as much. And so the other thing to note is if you look at this leg that is extending at the knee, this is a knee extension, you can see how usually one muscle will contract as the other one stretches, and then they kind of take turns. And so that just gives you an idea of how things can get over and undercompensated because the body is always trying to look for a specific type of symmetry. But because of repetitive movements and even just these minor tweaks, we find asymmetry in different places. And the other part is body awareness. When we can't perceive where our body is and we don't understand, like we can't feel that it's not in proper alignment, we don't know that it's a lack of flexibility versus mobility. And so one of the things is we have our sensors for proprioception are in those tendons that connect between our bone and our ligaments. And we have those sensors in our muscles. And so when we struggle to have things in the right place to begin with, it's hard for those sensors to know where things are supposed to go. And so there's just kind of a general lack of body awareness when we are hypermobile because we don't have that same advantage of knowing how it should feel when things are in their right place. Are there any questions with that? Because that's kind of like a lot of stuff. And then the other thing, people will say, or no, this is the, okay, so how can hypermobility impact body mechanics? This is one where this is going to completely depend on the person. And so I want to use my hypermobile knees as an example. Because my knees are hypermobile, instead of like the video on the left, you see the way she's almost fully extending her legs straight as she kicks back and then can step forward. And then if you look at the one on the right, this person's walking a little bit more gingerly. For me, because my knees are hypermobile, if I step back with as much force as that person on the left, it is very likely I am going to hyperextend my knee. I'm just going to pop my knee back because I don't have that innate body awareness for my body to know that's dangerous. You can't do that. It will pop back. And so my body has over time to overcompensate and to make sure that I'm moving as safely as I can. I don't kick back as far and I take smaller steps, more like the person on the right. And so when you take smaller steps, you're not extending your leg as much. And then what that will do is, because you're not extending your leg as much, you're also not lifting your leg as much. So that can cause things like weak hip flexors, you've got weak glutes from not kicking back as much. And then you're going to eventually end up with probably some additional ankle issues because your feet may start to cave inward, as you're seeing with the one on the right. Then I also have rounded shoulders that can impact the hip in a number of ways. Rounded shoulders can create an anterior pelvic tilt, but it can just as easily create a posterior pelvic tilt. So for me, because I round over, but my knees are hypermobile, to prevent myself from completely extending, I actually sort of shift my pelvis forward into a posterior to kind of balance things all out. And so it's not that one thing automatically impacts everyone the same way. We all will have various, hypermobility is a spectrum even on the body. You may have things that are more hypermobile than others. I, for example, don't really have issues with, like, I don't have ribs that dislocate themselves often. Some people have that as a constant issue. It's going to be different for everybody, but generally speaking, anything that the body is compensating or overcompensating for, it's going to come from somewhere else. And so also when we go to fix things or try to manage, it's going to be the same thing as well. We have to kind of go both sides. Does anyone have any questions about the impacting body mechanics? Okay, I'm going to keep going and we can do more questions at the end if we need to. So here is some of the most important stuff. And again, I'm going to stay in my wheelhouse, which is we're going to talk about muscles and movement. And specifically, we're going to look at tendons, because the tendons are what connect our bones to our muscles. So if we focus on things that help strengthen our tendons, the muscles that are connected to the tendons, we can create some additional stability for our joints. So the most important things, and I'm talking beginner, okay? If you've been working out for a while, this may not be 100% applicable to you, but especially for beginners, low to no impact movement using body weight, at most very light bands. This is where a lot of people, I think, are misled, unfortunately. And especially if you're hypermobile, yes, it is great to use resistance and load to build joint stability, but you cannot start there. If you start there before your joints are unstable, you are going to hurt yourself. It is so dangerous. So always, if you want to start improving body mechanics and posture and you're hypermobile, please start with low to no impact movement, things like slow yoga, Pilates style movement, and just stretching, really the basics. I know that sounds, but the basics, like learning to do push-ups at all different stages. These are things that can be immensely helpful. And then same with focusing on core and joint stability, core stability. I know it's very annoying and people talk about this a lot, but truly our hips and core are so deeply interconnected, and so much of our body's mechanics do originate from our hips. And so the first thing you always want to do is focus on your core and what can support the hip structure. And then in terms of joint stability, again, we're talking about very low to no impact movements that help strengthen the muscles that surround joints. And I'll get to that in a little bit more. The other is just focusing on body awareness and recognizing asymmetries. So not just asymmetries, like for example, with my rounded shoulders, I'm going to have tighter chest muscles. I'm going to be tighter in here, and I'm going to have looser my thoracic spine muscles are going to be looser. So like my rhomboids and my erector spinae running all the way down. Those are going to be looser because they're stretched. So it's recognizing that those asymmetries and what needs to be done, but also even side to side. And most of us, because of repetitive movements, even just from, you know, the dominant hand that we do things, will have imbalances laterally as well. And so for me, my left side tends to be raised because I hold bags on my left side. I hold the phone on my left side. Things like that. And so I'll notice that, yes, I have these kinds of imbalances, but also side to side, I have my right hip is tighter than my left hip. Paying attention to these things and recognizing these asymmetries. Did I spell asymmetries wrong? Asymmetries? Anyway, we're working on perfectionism here. Anti-perfectionism. But focusing on that can also help build that conscious body awareness as you continue of like, oh, this is where I'm tighter here, I'm tighter here. And throughout the day, you might be like, oh, now I can see it's because I'm constantly crossing this leg over this leg. That might be why this is tighter than this. You see where I'm going. And then focusing on movement that stretches and stabilizes. And so again, this is what we're talking about with body weight movement. So think about things like when you're in downward facing dog, and then kind of moving through into like a chaturanga, that stretches and stabilizes the entire body. So things like that, it's not about doing, you know, heavy weights. We want things that make us foundationally strong, but also are not ignoring the fact that we need to stretch. So a mix of both. And then in terms of types of stretching, I've talked about this before. I think the last one, or which one? The second workshop, but with the somatic release workshop, that's what it was. There are different types of stretching. The two that are safest for, and again, please know, nothing is safe for everybody. These are just general recommendations, but the types that are going to be safest are dynamic stretching, which is stretching with movement. And this is usually, again, a combination of kind of like pulsing, right? So think about if you've ever done like a low lunge and then kind of kick back to do the hamstring stretch, that's a dynamic stretch. You're moving, you're stretching on your inhale and your exhale. We don't want stretches where we're staying in one place. And then the second type that is really good, especially for hypermobile, is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or PNF stretching. And this is stretching where you are using some sort of resistance to help you stretch. So imagine I'm lying down and this is my hamstring. Or I either have someone or I'm using something that is pushing against my leg while I'm pushing my leg this way, someone's pushing this way, trying to stretch it more. So it's like creating a tension and getting a stretch that way. Like putting your leg up against a wall and then pushing into it to get a greater stretch. Imagine like that. And let's talk about specifically joint stability. There are too many joints for me to like go through everything individually. So let me just give you an example of the knee. So when I say like, oh, we want to focus on stabilizing the joint, here's what I mean. You can see in the left-hand photo, you can see tendons, you can see ligaments. You probably notice a lot, you probably recognize a lot of these names, like the anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL, things like that. We can't do anything about these ligaments. They just are what they are. What we can do, see the quadriceps tendon toward the top? That tendon connects to, going over to the right side, our quadriceps muscle. And then you can see the surrounding thigh muscles. So what we can do is work to stabilize and strengthen the quadricep and some of those other smaller muscles surrounding the knee to help hold it in place. So it's not the same thing as having nice taut ligaments, but it's a way to help compensate. And this is another thing that I forgot to mention, not just in terms of why can I not, this would probably went with the flexibility part. How can I be hypermobile but not be flexible? When we overcompensate, our muscles get sore. And so you think about right now, think about if your knee is hypermobile and it's just kind of, it's just hanging out there. It's not as secure as it should be. Those knee stabilizing muscles are probably trying to work harder to hold in your knee. And various other, like your hips, some of your hip muscles may be working your glutes, like you may be working harder to hold things in. And that is going to create pain and tension because it's working too hard. I don't know about anybody else, like a good example of this. Like when I'm vacuuming, I get so used to having to hold on to things so tightly. Like when I vacuum, I'm like, loosen your grip because I'm like holding the vacuum like it's gonna fly out of my hand or something. It's sort of like that. And so a lot of us have muscle tension. My neck is very hypermobile. My shoulders, all of my upper trapezius, my neck muscles are always very sore because they're working so hard to hold my head up because I don't have the same level of stability that some others do. So that's what we mean with joint stability. And then any kind of movement to avoid, most importantly, especially initially, high impact movement, that's just gonna stress your joints. Don't do that. And impact obviously meaning like jumping, plyometrics. Walking is usually considered low impact, but again, everything is going to be dependent. Walking may really bother you. It may really bother you initially. And so it's important to do movement that is not as hard. You can do movements that aren't repetitive on the joints. So think about instead of doing a knee extension where you're extending at the knee, you can keep the leg straight and just lift it a little bit here. You're still going to strengthen the quadriceps, you're going to strengthen the hips, but you're not going to irritate the knee by moving it unnecessarily. And then another, avoiding free weights especially, because the further we get a weight away from a joint, the less secure any of it is, and the more you're going to risk, especially if you're hypermobile, serious injury. Free weights require a lot of, think about just the amount of joint stability in your wrist to hold dumbbells where they should be so they're not flopping all over. So definitely avoiding free weights initially until you have a proper amount of foundational stability. And same with really other loaded equipment. And then definitely avoiding static stretching, which is when somebody will tell you to get into a stretch and hold it in one place for 30 to 60 seconds. That's generally not good if you're hypermobile. We have those sensors in our tendons and ligaments. They do this really cool thing called autogenic inhibition, where after about 30 seconds of feeling tension against it, they will provide an additional release so you can get further into a stretch. However, if you're already out, if your body doesn't know a safe range of motion, letting yourself go even further into it is not always a good thing. And so I don't recommend this in general because it's really easy for your body to just kind of fall into a position it should not be in. So I would avoid that, and that's why I definitely recommend stretching with movement. And what else? How can we manage pain, tissue pain from hypermobility? So look, I know people want, like a really fun or like a one thing that's gonna help, like take this one supplement and that's just not the case. It's gonna be different for everybody. And the truth is, as much as even I hate this, it really is the basics, the tried and true basics. So in terms of nutrition, I'm not gonna talk about this too much. You all know most of us also struggle with nutrition for a number of reasons. So what I will say is it's just focusing on the basics. Make sure you get all of your macronutrients if you can, not just protein, all of your macronutrients. And don't forget micronutrients. Things like vitamin C help with collagen production. I did a whole nutrition workshop if you want to watch that one. There's more information in there. But really just the basics, okay? And eating things that are not inflammatory for you, and that will be different for everybody because somebody who has mast cell activation syndrome is going to have different things that are inflammatory for them than someone who doesn't. Someone who's, has celiac. See, like what is anti-inflammatory for one is not necessarily for the other. So the things that work for your body. This one, I know this one really sucks too. Hydration. This is my seltzer. The thing about especially muscle pain, our muscles and connective tissue need water and hydration to, like the connective tissue and the muscle, they create this slide with one another. If we are dehydrated and we don't have enough water, it doesn't have that nice glide and slide like it should. And so two things that help with that glide and slide are hydration and stimulation, like self-myofascial release. So trigger ball massages, foam rollers, and that is because it helps warm up the area. You can stimulate blood flow, that kind of thing. And then the last one is going to be heat. Heat has also been proven within reason. I'm talking like a warm heating pad. Heat has been proven to be much more effective on chronic muscular pain. Cold can be useful for joint inflammation in some cases, but that's sort of a case-by-case basis. Generally speaking, heat is going to be much more soothing, and it's even been found to help reduce delayed onset muscle soreness after working out, like a little bit of heat on the area. So those are really the four main things. I know they're not, trendy and fun, but they work. So that is it. Does anybody have questions? I gotta be honest, I don't know about the next workshop. If anyone wants to request a topic, if there's something you want to hear about, it's not that I can't think of anything, but I just haven't yet. So if anyone has something, let me know. And Camille, how are you? Let me see, vibration. I can't see the rest of this chat. Give me 1 second. I can't see the bottom part of the chat, I don't think. Vibration plates to help stabilize the joints. What is a vibration plate? Hold on, first of all, let me just do this. Let me stop sharing. Okay. And now you can just see me. Let me look up what vibration plates are because, oh, okay, that's what I was saying. You know what's funny? I kind of use my indoor trampoline like that. I think that if this is something you're into, it's certainly not going to be harmful if you're prepared. I wouldn't recommend using it initially. But yeah, anything that creates a little bit of a balance challenge can help with stabilization. I would want to make sure it doesn't vibrate like, too hard because that would create irritation. But I do stuff like on my indoor trampoline. I will do certain things on there because it's kind of like a Bosu ball, but not as much, where it gives you that little bit of added balance challenge, which can help increase and build stability as well. Hopefully that answered that. Camille, it's good to see you, friend. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, in that case, unless anybody wants to, hold on, I'm gonna stop recording this one. Oh no, I can't do that. If anybody would like to chat about anything else, then that is fine. Ever serious menus. Oh no, Tom. It's that stinking repetitive movement without realizing. That's a situation where I would say you're probably already doing it, but heat and cold, a combination of the two. I remember last year when I think it was the first book I did. I think it was the very first book back in October last year. I sat cross-legged on my couch for like 4 days straight doing that thing to the point where I messed up a bunch of the tendons in my knee, in my left knee. And I'm just now starting to be able to like sit on my knees like this. It was bad. Hot baths and yes. Have you ever done Epsom salt baths? Those are great. Although because I've seen some people go a little bonkers with the Epsom salt. Like, yeah, gotta be careful. Okay, friends. Well, hopefully this was informative and helpful. And yeah, you do, yeah, perfect. I will send out the slides to the email list just so you guys have them in case you want them. Yeah, that's it. You can always email with any questions you have. And I am going to start doing one-on-one sessions for people soon. So if you're interested, if anyone's interested in that, just send me an email. Yeah, and we'll go from there. But yeah, let me know. Oh, good, Camille. Yeah, and email me if you have any questions. I think I sort of black out when I do these things. Like I have all in my head everything I think that I want to say, and then I black out and I don't know if I actually said all of it. So if there's anything, just let me know. And yeah, just a quick note to you all since you're here. I am not going back to TikTok to that account. So I will be putting more, I'm going to be posting more consistently here, starting soon, but I'm not going to be going back there, but I will be here and doing other things. And yeah, I'm looking at my laptop because that's where the chat is. So anyway, yeah, thanks to y'all for coming today and go enjoy. Oh, Camille, same. I'm not going to say it on here on live, but we should perhaps talk in the real world. Yeah. All right. It was nice talking to you all. I've missed you. Yeah. I'm gonna end this because I just keep saying mwah, mwah, mwah. I will chat with you all soon. Have a lovely day. Bye.